Welcome back. Today, we get the transmission out of the 67. Let's get to it. Okay, as you've seen in previous videos, I've got torque boxes on both sides, gussets, floor supports. I still have yet to do the floors, and there's a reason for that. I'm doing the firewall, which if you look in the manual, that actually goes underneath the floor. So I'm going to hold off on finishing the floor patches, the floor sides until I'm done with the firewall, so then the floor can go over it. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to raise the car up a little bit more to get the transmission out. My little 2 and 3 ton jack stands, I think all 4 I have it on right now are 3-ton jack stands. They're maxed out. I went ahead, and I'm not going to trust these little stack jacks. Those are just for supports. So those are going to get out of the way, and I probably won't use those for a little while. I did pick up, for multiple projects, not just for this project, some pipe stands. I think what I'm going to do, and I think these are 1 ton each. I'm not worried about him being supported or having enough capacity to support. So I think what I'm going to do is raise the car up a little more, probably start at the back. Obviously, well, maybe not obvious, but I'm not going to put them at the same point. That would put the car way too high up, and I wouldn't be able to safely drop the transmission from that point. So I'm going to think carefully about this. I'm probably going to do the rear frame rails for this, probably at the lowest point of this, and maybe the front frame rail. If there's a nice section, I can just support it there. So that's going to give me maybe another 8 inches of lift on this, which should be plenty. And I think it is worth a word of caution. When I jack up a car, I try hard not to be underneath it, being held up by just a jack, but I try not to do too much around it. If your jack slips out, even if you're not under the car, like if I'm on the other side between the car and the wall, that could easily scoot that way as it's falling and pin me there. Things can go south really quickly. I have had a hydraulic jack like this where I had it locked and I had the car up and I turned my back to grab a tool and turned and looked back, and the jack was settling down rather quickly. If I had been under the car, that's not enough time to get out from under the car. So just be very cautious when you're jacking up and securing cars. So when you go to the emergency room, remember, I saw it on YouTube is not a valid excuse. All right, I got the drive shaft out. For the rear U-joint, if you do this, I recommend throwing some tape. I just took some cheap painter's tape that I had lying around there. That's just to keep these caps on here. If these fall off, there are a bunch of needle bearings in there, and they are not fun to pick up. Ask me how I know this. So I pulled out the drive shaft, and you may have seen on the time lapse, or maybe you didn't, got the transmission out, exhaust out. The way mine is set up, it is all one piece front to end, and man, that was a beast to get out of there. I had to drop down the rear axle and finagle it and manipulate it with a strap just to get it so that these pieces would go through the transmission hub under the tunnel. So I'm trying to remember how I did this last time. I think last time I had the entire rear out, leaf springs and all, so I was able to just pull it out the back of the car. That was a lot easier than what I just did with them. And just as an in case, I do have my 3-ton jack stands underneath, and they're, I don't know if we can wiggle around from here, they're not touching, but they're right underneath the plate on the bottom of the leaf spring. So if for whatever reason one of these fails or something happens, hopefully I've got a backup going on there. I don't see that happening, but it is cheap insurance. So I think I'm gonna hit pause for now, go take a break, and I'll come back to it. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit for you there. Next steps, I'm gonna see if I want to raise the front end a little further now. It should be a lot easier to access. I think the right spot there, the best place is going to be just to the front on the frame rail there. We'll see. It's possible I get under there now and start removing things to access the transmission. So I'm going to play it by ear and get under there and see when I get back to it. Well, as you saw in the time lapse, I hope you saw in the time lapse, I wasn't actually able to safely raise the car up enough to get those stands from the front. So I put it back down on the tried and true 3-ton jack stands and did all the disconnection and dropping of the transmission. And then because I wasn't actually working on anything, I did do something that is a little sketchy. I did stack some wood, and just to give myself a couple extra inches, raised it up just enough to pull the transmission out and dropped it back down. So first thing I did was make sure everything that was hooked up to the transmission got disconnected. I started with the coolant lines, and they're over there. Disconnect from the radiator, disconnect from the transmission. You've got your linkage there. There's supposed to be I believe it's a throttle kickdown. Mine wasn't actually attached, which is fun. The tube for the dipstick there. And then I'm not going to go through step by step. There are people out there who do it far better than I do, but removing all the torque bolts and making sure you have all the bell housing bolts off. It's a little difficult to separate if you forget one. Ask me how I know that. Here's the real fun part though. This is the cross member for the transmission, and let me show you the bolts. Here are the two bolts for the transmission cross members. I don't know if this is the right kind. I would question if it is. One of them, although it's got thread damage, okay, no big deal. It's, actually the right size. This other one, I go and I'm wondering why it's a different socket size. Oh, that's because this isn't even the right bolt. Like, this is a larger nut. I can thread it on and off just like that. I can't believe I drove around in this car like this. I don't think they had a torque wrench, whoever installed this transmission. All the bolts were remarkably easy to remove, which I guess that is something I should be thankful for, but also a little terrified about. There it is, finally out. That was a little bit of a beast of a job, But honestly, pretty doable if you take your time. This is definitely the kind of working on a car I'm more familiar with, although I've never dropped a transmission out before. All the mechanics are a little more straightforward to me than the metalwork, etc. But I got to clean up this mess and see if I can park my actual car in the garage at some point. Okay, and let me see if I can zoom in on the number for you, and we'll see if I can make that upright for you. But the number on the transmission is Charlie 9Z Papa 7006 Alpha. And over here a 4. I'm going to look this up. If there are any transmission gurus out there, maybe you can give me more information. If I'm not mistaken, this is a 1969 transmission. I don't know what this came out of. My car is obviously a 67. I know it's a non-original engine, so hey, maybe if someone's looking for a 1969 transmission, let me know. My plan eventually is to put an AOD in this. It's an automatic car, so I was going to keep it automatic, but I was looking for an AOD. So yeah, I'll let you know what I find out about it. All right, if you're still with me, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. Next steps, well, I guess next steps, I'm going to find a place to stash this transmission and pull my car in the garage. Next step, I'm going to bring the car back down. I guess in hindsight, I didn't have to raise the rear end that much since I didn't really raise the front. And I'm going to remove the hood and get the engine out. As I've said before, I'm going to work on the cowl and firewall, and I need to get the engine out of the way to do that. So getting the transmission out was the next step towards that. All right, thanks so much.